So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Leslie Green, and I am filling in for Brendan today. We're really excited to have you all here for our monthly lunchtime learning webinar. Today we have Christine Saplin with us, who is going to be able to give us an introduction to container gardening. Before I pass things over to her, I did want to just go over a couple of technical reminders. Today's webinar will include about a 25-minute presentation from Christine, followed by a Q&A session. Everyone has been automatically muted upon joining the WebEx, so if you have any questions during or after the presentation, please go ahead and type those into the WebEx, and we'll be collecting those for Christine to respond to at the end. So without any further ado, I'll pass things over to Christine.
Thank you. Hello and welcome to Gardening in Containers, or as I would call it, Containers 101. I'm a master gardener with the Albany County Cornell Cooperative Extension, and I'm pleased to be joining you today. And hopefully I will be sharing some information that will be helpful to you as well. Container gardening, it offers an opportunity to use very creative containers and very small spaces. You may be trying to get those workbook boots to look a little better, or you might want to take your grandchildren's water boots and make them into a planter. Whatever it is, it could be that car in your driveway that you wanted to convert into a garden, or you could be interested in downsizing your vegetable garden by using a pallet and buckets to grow your plants. Or you may be interested in container gardening because you're trying to beautify your community. Another thing about container gardening is that you can use it in terms of recycling. Here you see a series of 2-liter soda bottles that have been cut in half. The top has been inverted into the bottom. Plants have been started, and when the watering happens, the water goes down through the soil and there's a reservoir in the bottom. This is a great thing to do with children or grandchildren. And as you see, it's hanging from a railing, perhaps on a patio. That may be your motive in learning about container gardening, or you might simply want the most impressive container garden on your block. And hopefully, the information I give you today will help you reach your goal, whatever it might be. What you will need. There are 3 basic things that you need. You need a container. You need the correct potting mix to fill the container. And of course, you need the plants. When we talk about containers, we have some choices. You might think about the plastic container. It's very lightweight. It can be plain or decorative, and after a time it does tend to fade, but it is an easy container to use. Some of you may have terracotta containers. They have that traditional look to them. They tend to crack after a few years, and water tends to be drawn from the soil when you planted terracottas. So you're going to have to water a little more often if your containers are that material. If you have a ceramic container, it holds the water better than the clay, and it might be a slightly more expensive. But the other thing about ceramics, you can't leave it out during the winter because with the freezing and thawing, it will definitely crack. The last suggestion is resin. It's the most expensive of the choices of containers, but it's the longest lasting. And you can actually leave a resin container outdoors during the winter and it will not crack. Of course, here's a picture of one of the containers I didn't mention. This is a metal trough. Anything could be used as a container as long as it has good drainage. There have to be drainage holes in the bottom, and you can cover those drainage holes with screen or pottery shard or a coffee filter or even gravel. And that will prevent you from losing soil when you water your container. The other important thing is to place your container above the ground. This container seems to be sitting directly on the ground. If it's on bricks, it allows the water from inside the container to drain properly, especially during heavy rains. If you are using a pot from last year, make sure that it is properly cleaned. The best way to clean a pot is to either use 1 part bleach to 10 parts water, or you could use a solution of 50% vinegar and 50% water. It doesn't have to be the industrial strength vinegar. It can be simply white vinegar from your pantry. And don't forget to scrub those crusty parts off your old pot. You don't want any lingering disease from a prior year to deal with. Also, if you are using terracotta pots, another hint is to soak the pot completely for maybe an hour or two before you plant it. And that way you will have moisture in the pot to begin with. We can't stress enough that you have to have drainage holes in your container. This plastic container had drainage holes already drilled, but sometimes you're going to have to drill your own. And check the bottom of your container. There might be slight indentations that are suggesting where holes could be drilled. So be careful of that. Now, what to fill your container with. First of all, don't reuse the soil that you used last year. Your plants need fresh growing medium. And when you select a growing mix, the potting mix is the best selection. It's lightweight and it's rich in nutrients. Some potting mixes even have fertilizer mixed in. Don't try to dig up garden soil to put in your container. It's too heavy. The heavy garden soil compacts the roots of your plants, and those roots need air. So they need a lightweight potting medium. When you're looking in the store, make sure that you read your label. This is potting mix, not potting soil. Potting soil is heavier than potting mix. And potting soil is actually best for indoor plants. So if you're doing an outdoor container, try to find potting mix. And you also have to keep in mind, if you're planning on planting succulents, you're going to need a potting mix that has a lot of sand in it. If you are planting orchids or tropicals, you're going to want a mixture of bark in the potting mix. If you're planting vegetables or herbs in the containers, avoid any soil mixes that contain pesticides. You don't want the chemicals to leach into your vegetables. Bagged topsoil and compost are cheaper, but reserve them for working into the ground as opposed to the pots. There is a suggestion to add some compost when you're planting, but not complete compost in your container. And in a pot where watering happens often, the plant roots need to fill the container. So that's another reason why you need the potting mix, not the potting soil. Once you have your potting mix, well, maybe I should start with suggesting something that I've done in the past that maybe some of you have done as well. You get excited about filling your container, you fill it up with potting mix, you put your plants in, and then you try to lift that planter to put it in the proper place, and it is too heavy to lift. We suggest then, in order to make it more a lighter weight, that you try to fill 1/3 of your container with a light material. That light material could be pine cones that are in a net. It's important to put them in a net bag so that you can remove them easily at the end of the growing season. Or it might be pine bark nuggets. I used to use the pine cones, but I found the pine bark nuggets to be very good. They give a lot of air circulation to the roots of your plants. And after you're finished at the end of the growing season, those nuggets are compostable. So you can put them in your regular garden, or you can let them go biodegradable in your compost heap. Planting peanuts are sometimes used by people. Again, I suggest that you enclose your packing peanuts in an onion bag that you might find in the grocery store. Before you fill your container, you want to use either pottery shards, or I use coffee filters. I take one coffee filter and put it at the bottom of the container, covering those holes so that you don't lose your soil when you're watering. Sometimes you can also add, or you want to add, some moisture crystals when you're mixing your potting mix. The other thing to remember, moisten the potting mix before you put it in the container. Use quite a bit of water to get it nice and moist, because as you know, with a dry sponge doesn't absorb as well as a wet sponge does. And if the potting mix is moist, it will ensure that your plants are going to be able to absorb the water that the potting mix has absorbed. Next thing to think about, what plant materials are you going to use in your container? Are you going to plant annual flowers for that porch arrangement? Are you going to plant herbs or maybe vegetables? Flowers, the annuals are the best to give you all around, all season color. So looking for annuals that will give a pop of color is always a good idea. When you're selecting your plants, you're going to be looking for, well, you're going to have to keep in mind the site of your container. Is it going to be in the sun? Is it going to be in the shade, or is it going to be in partial sun? That is extremely important because you're looking for plants that will thrive in those particular conditions. When you go to the garden store, please read the information carefully on the tags in the plants. As you can see here, the 4 plants that are selected require full sun. So if you're planting a container that will be in the full sun, you might want these specific plants. Sometimes the information is very easy to find on the label. Sometimes you have to read the fine print, and other times you have to look in a different area to find out what the culture is or the requirements are. Turn that light off for a minute. Okay. When you select the plants, you're also going to look for different textures to make your container interesting. When the plant label says full sun, that refers to 8 to 12 hours of direct sunlight. If the label says part sun, 4 to 8 hours of direct sunlight. And shade, 2 to 4 hours of early or late sunlight, either early in the morning or late in the afternoon. There's a specific anatomy to a successful planter that you're going to want to be the talk of the neighborhood. You want to have a thriller, something that draws the eye to the container. You also need a filler plant or two, something that will fill between the edge of the planter and the tall plant that you have in the back. And you also are going to be looking for a spiller, plants that drape or spill over the edges of the planter and soften those edges. When you're dealing with a thriller like this banana canna or this coleus, you might want to add the begonia as the filler. And the number of begonia plants you add depends on the size of your container. For a spiller, this is dichondra and this is verbena over on the other side. You probably want between 1 and 3 plants for a spiller in your container. Annuals that do well in containers in the sun, grasses and tall plants as thrillers. For fillers, angelonia, dusty miller, geraniums, marigolds, petunias. Spillers, you want a licorice vine or Swedish ivy. Sweet potato vine is very popular as a spiller. If you use creeping Jenny, beware that creeping Jenny, when it touches the ground, will stay on the ground, and it will be something that you will have year after year if you don't pull it out. I can say that from experience. Here are 2 containers. Here's your thriller, the snake plant in the back, which we consider sometimes as a house plant. Yes, you can use those in your outdoor containers. Here we have the beautiful verbena again and some begonias. Verbena again draping down. Here's a hibiscus standard plant, and in the corner down here we have a begonia, and this is flowering maple, a boutilon, which is an interesting spiller. Another planter, and this one is container, and this one is using trumpet vine, which is a perennial. Here's some coleus and calabracoa on the bottom, so that you have many, many choices. If your container's in the shade, you will probably looking for thrillers like elephant ears or caladium, Hawaiian tie plant, ligularia. Your fillers can be begonias, coleus, impatiens, lobelia. You'll also see Turanian in a minute. It's the wishbone flower. And for your spillers, always wave petunias. And again, the sweet potato vine will grow in both sun and shade. Here's a shade planter. Hawaiian tie plant, Black Magic is the thriller. Impatiens, Butterfly Deep Pink is the filler. And your wishbone is going to be the spiller on the bottom. Or in this case, it might just simply soften the edge and not go down as we saw the verbena in the previous slides. Here's the coleus with wax begonia as the filler. So you have many options, and it's sometimes helpful just to look at magazines to see about different planting combinations. When planting the container, arrange your plants in the container as you think they look best. Then the next thing is to remove each plant from the container that you bought it in. You need to tease the roots. The roots need to be spread apart. They've been confined in that small pot in the nursery or store where you bought the plant. So you need to tease the roots out. And this is something you should do for any plant, whether it be a house plant that you're planting or a plant that you're putting in the ground or a plant in a container. Once you have all the plants in the container and you have topped off the soil, it's important to water them in. Now, to help your plants thrive, you can use fertilizer. If you fertilize every other week with a 20-20-20 water-soluble fertilizer, your plant should be very happy. Since potting mix has very few nutrients, I know that some potting mixes now say that they have fertilizer in them already. That may be your choice. And you have to remember that watering often washes away any of the nutrients that the potting mix has to begin with. A 20-20-20 means that it has equal parts of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium in the fertilizer. You may want to think about a slow release fertilizer like Osmocote, and that could be added when you're mixing up your potting soil as you're planting your container. Watering. Pots dry out very quickly. Some pots need to be watered every day. To lessen the task of watering every day, you might be thinking about adding water retaining crystals, which you can buy at the gardening store, that again could be mixed in with your potting mix as you plant the container. You could huddle your pots in the afternoon if that makes it easier for them to share moisture. Sometimes afternoon shade will help. And I know it says use self-watering pots, but I honestly have had no success with self-watering pots. So I have given up on them, but you may find you have success. When you're watering, try to water in the morning. So the plants and the leaves of the plants have a chance to have that moisture evaporate during the day. If you do water in the evening or late afternoon, only water the soil. Do not get the plants wet, because getting the plants wet increases the chance of diseases in your plants. So if you do have to water them late in the day, just water the soil. Don't spray the entire plant. Here's some pots clustered around each other to try to share the humidity or moisture in the air. You also need to be mindful of wind, and especially the direction the wind is coming from. You may already know that west winds are very damaging, and I know that a lot of gardeners have complained about wind damage from this past winter, where it was very windy. So be mindful of where you're placing the container. It probably should be placed in a more protected place, because your winds can dry your soil out and your foliage as well. Also keep in mind that plants that climb, such as the plant that we saw earlier, and I can't think of the name of it at this, the trumpet vine. It needs something to climb on, like a trellis. They are more susceptible to drying out, so you need to be careful about that as well. Now, some of us want a kitchen garden at the back door or on the patio, and some of us want a chance for the chef of the house to be able to snip fresh herbs for a particular recipe. So growing herbs in containers is a way to make that happen. Herbs require certain things that you need to keep in mind. They need full sun. They do not do well in partial shade or shade. They need lean soil, soil that is light, and they need, well, they can use a soilless potting mix if you happen to have that. That will help your herbs grow. Herbs can be overwintered outdoors if there's enough soil, if there's at least 5 gallons of soil in the container with the herb, and a plastic pot would be best for an herb to overwinter outdoors. But sometimes it's better to bring the herbs inside so they're on the windowsill and still fresh for your favorite recipes. Herbs for containers, ones that work best, mint. But I have to remind you, mint is a thug in the garden. You have to harness mint. If you don't contain it in a pot, it is going to spread as far as it can. So be mindful of that if you're planting mint in your garden, as well as planting mint in your container. Oregano is a good herb to grow in a container. Rosemary. Now with rosemary, you can bring that inside for the winter. You should bring it inside. Don't leave it outside. It can't handle our climate in the winter. It needs a more Mediterranean climate. Sage. Here you see sage growing in a pot. The clay pots seem to be the best for herbs because they allow the soil to dry out. And herbs don't like to have wet feet. Basil's a good one to grow in a pot. And remember to pinch out the top of your basil so that the plant gets bushier. We have chives, cilantro. You can see a number of pots of herbs gathered together in these pictures. And again, it's mostly terracotta pots. So herbs are a lot of fun to grow in your containers. You could plant one large container with many different kinds of herbs. And in that case, you're going to think about the size of the plant, the mature plant. Dill, we know, is going to be very tall, so it should be in the center. And parsley is going to be shorter. We've got our basil on the side, a little cilantro down here. And parsley is going to be shorter, so it's going to benefit from being at the edge so it gets more sunlight. And don't be afraid to put quite a few herbs in a pot. I found that a little competition is good for plants. Now to vegetables in containers. You don't have to give up growing a small vegetable garden if you've been downsized and you've had to move to an apartment or a condo. You can use containers. The thing to keep in mind with containers for vegetables or edibles is that vegetables and edibles are very heavy feeders. So this is where we need to mix in some compost when preparing the potting soil. And it's recommended that you use 3 parts potting soil, potting mix, to 1 part compost when you're getting ready to plant your vegetables in your containers. Growing vegetables in pots means that you're able to place the pots where deer and bunnies and other critters won't eat them. It's another reason for using containers for your vegetables. Now, when selecting a container, think about which vegetable you're going to grow in it and how large the plant is going to be when it is mature. And is that plant going to be tall and leggy, and will it need support in the case of a tomato cage or a trellis for a vine? When selecting a vegetable to grow in a container, again, think how large will that plant grow? And when you're looking for specific plants, look for plants that are labeled container friendly. There are patio tomatoes and container friendly cucumbers that you can buy, and you'll know that they are going to do well in a container on your patio or porch. Tomatoes, if you're planning on planting or growing them in a container, 1 tomato plant for a 5-gallon pot or a bushel basket. Consider cherry tomatoes or other small tomatoes rather than the beefsteak tomatoes to grow in containers, because the smaller your tomatoes, the smaller the plant. You're looking for a determinate plant, not an indeterminate. Indeterminate tomato plants send out shoots and they get to be huge. You want something determinate that has a smaller growth. You can grow eggplant in a pot. 1 plant in a 5-gallon pot will work, or you can put 3 plants in a 15-gallon pot. And here you see this gardener has used 1 eggplant plant, a basil plant in the background, some flowers, and I think this is the hint of a strawberry in the middle. So don't be afraid to combine things in your pots. Cucumbers, 1 plant in a 3 to 5-gallon pot. The best plant is the bush type cucumber. If you don't have the bush type cucumber to plant in your container, you're planting the vining cucumber, you have to provide a trellis for the vines to grow on. and to support it. Because here, without a trellis, you see it's draping down on the soil or the gravel. I think that's one lone cucumber waiting to be picked. Squash can be grown in containers. One plant in a 5-gallon pot, and look for compact growing plants. Look for that in the description of the plant, and you'll be assured of more success in gardening in a container. And there's the traditional strawberry pot. I've planted these a number of times. They're lovely to look at. They're lovely to harvest. And I have tried to put a tube in the middle that has holes drilled in it at different places as a watering tube, so that you can water through the tube and make sure that the water reaches these plants down here as well as the plants in the upper part of your strawberry pot. There are other containers. This is a container of sorts. It's called a straw bale garden. It takes a while to set it up. You can't just plant it in one day. You have to get your straw bales, not hay. Hay contains seeds. The straw bales have to be conditioned. You have to add a certain amount of fertilizer over the course of 2 weeks before you can actually plant your plants in the tops of the straw bales. Potato bags are interesting because you can plant your tomatoes in these large plastic bags. And to harvest, all you have to do is simply turn the bag over and empty it out, and you'll have your potatoes. I am experimenting this year with grow bags. I have a children's gardening camp at Extension, and we're going to be using these grow bags. I wanted to use them because there's a flap here that can be lifted up so you can actually see the roots of the plants. And I thought that would be a great idea for children to see what the plant is doing under the surface of the soil. These come in many different sizes, 3-gallon, 10-gallon, 20-gallon, but be mindful that they are heavy when they're totally planted. I'll let you know next year how the grow bags work. Don't be afraid to mix vegetables, herbs, and flowers together in one pot. And if you look closely here, one of these pots is not as good as the other. This is the better pot because it's up on bricks off the ground. This pot is not. So if there's a heavy rain, the water's not going to be able to drain out. It's going to be kept in the container, and we don't want that. If you're looking for a selected list of vegetable varieties, there is a website, and it's through Cornell University, vegvariety.cce.cornell.edu. And if you're interested in help from master gardeners in terms of answering your gardening questions, we do have a hotline Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. So you can call this number and ask your questions of a master gardener. If you're not able to call, you can email us questions at albanymg@cornell.edu. And I invite you to visit our website, www.ccealbany.com, where you can find information about events and workshops that are being held on gardening. We are trying to be as accessible as possible. Some reminders. Choose your pot well. Remember that drainage. And choose a soil mix that will be lightweight and porous. Choose the right plants for the right place. Water when needed. And you can use a water-soluble 20-20-20 fertilizer every other week. And don't forget to groom your plants. Deadhead them. They'll blossom more often. And make sure you're checking for any unwanted guests or insects. If you do find insects and you want to know what they are, that's the time to call the hotline or send an email to the master gardeners. But most of all, what I want you to remember is to have fun when you're planting and enjoy growing things in containers. And that is my presentation. And I think there is a handout that's going to be made available. It's called Vegetable and Herb Gardening in Containers, and that should answer some more questions that you might have. I think it's time for Leslie.
Yeah, thank you so much, Christine. That was really informative, and I'll definitely be taking some of those tips myself. Before we get into the Q&A, you did mention that we have a handout that we'll be able to share, but we did get a fair number of questions as well as to whether the slides will be available to share.
The PowerPoint, would that be the PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, I think that's something that you've recorded, so it's going to be available, correct?
Yep, that's correct. We do have the whole session recorded, so that will be up online, and then we'll send out that handout as well. So we can just touch base offline, perhaps, whether there are any portions of the PowerPoint slides that you might be willing to send out with that as well.
Okay.
But yep, this whole presentation will be available for folks to download and review on the OGS website. So I'll have Brendan send out a notification once that's available. Our first question here, and we'll just go in the order of when things came in. This person has squash and cucumbers in containers, and they're wondering what they can do about cucumber beetles.
Cucumber beetles. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, there's a companion plant that discourages cucumber beetles from the cucumbers, and I believe it's petunias. I am not totally sure, but that's my first reaction to that question. Cucumber beetles, you can pick them off if you find them, you have an infestation. They don't come off the plants as easily as aphids do. Aphids, you can just spray with water and they will leave your plant. If I can, I will send you the information, Leslie, if I look that up. That's one of the things with master gardeners. We may not know all the answers at the moment, but we know where to find them.
Oh, okay, that sounds great. The next question is about soil mixes. So they're asking, are there any other differences between the potting mix and the potting soil other than the lighter nature of the potting mix?
That's essentially the difference, the lightness of the potting mix as opposed to the soil, which is heavier. The soil tends to compact the roots of the plant and it doesn't allow as much air circulation. And we don't think of plants as needing air circulation for their roots, but they do. They need some air.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I've always wondered myself in the store, like what the difference is. So the next question, is it too late to begin planting large flower pots and containers as you've shown for a late summer bloom? And if not, which ones would you recommend? And also, is it too late for vegetables?
I don't think it's too late. I think as gardeners, we are always hopeful for things to work out well. I don't think it's too late for vegetables because I'm trying to keep vegetables alive and well to be planted by children in a garden in 2 weeks. So I have taken the pepper plants and the tomato plants out of the 4-packs or the 6-packs that they come in, and I've transplanted them into a larger pot, and I'm giving them fertilizer every 2 weeks or every other week. And they are going to be put in the ground and put in different containers in 2 weeks. So it's not too late. And it's not too late in terms of the flowers that are still available in the garden shops. Your petunias, your verbena, they're still at their prime. You may have to cut them back slightly and pinch them slightly to give them more chance to build up their strength for the rest of the growing season. But no, I don't think it's too late at all.
Okay, great. It's very nice to hear encouraging words like that.
Oh, all gardeners
so
are hopeful. There's no way around it. You have to be an optimist to be a gardener.
Yeah, that's a good way of thinking of it. The next question has to do with fertilizer. This person's saying that they often find that fertilizer causes their plants to turn yellow and look scorched pretty quickly, even though they're not fertilizing very often. And they're wondering if it has something to do with the soil that they're using or perhaps other factors.
It can have something to do with the soil if there's fertilizer already in that potting mix, but you might sometimes, like tomato plants, their bottom leaves will turn yellow, just for no reason that you've done anything wrong, but they've turned yellow. I've had that happen to a couple of plants of mine. As far as the fertilizer, if you dilute it to a gentler strength, I think you will find that the yellowing disappears and you won't have that. What I found to be very dangerous is when planting a container and putting fertilizer directly into the potting mix. Not using a water-soluble fertilizer is far better, I think, than granular fertilizer.
Okay, great. Thank you. We got several questions around pinching herbs, wondering what you mean by pinching them, how you do it, and if you could talk about some of the best practices for doing this, and then a specific request to explain this and how you do it to basil.
Okay. Is there a way that I can go back to my PowerPoint?
Yep, I think that if you...
Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to go back to, it's much easier to show you with a picture. Here's the basil. And as it's growing up, it has one stem and it has the leaves coming out to the sides. If you pinch out the top growing tip, your plant is going to start to send out shoots to the sides and get bushier. Otherwise, you're just going to have one tall, leggy stalk with leaves on the sides. If you pinch out the top, it will make the plant much bushier. Pinching out, we also do, well, you deadhead a marigold that you pinch out the top of it. With zinnias, cut and come again, you try to take the blossoms because you're going to get more flowers. I don't know whether I've been helpful there or not. Here on the basil, these are very small basil plants, and here's the growing tip right here. And if you just pinch it out, it will start to send out shoots to the side and become bushier. Here you can see a growing tip here too. I hope that helps.
Thank you. Yeah, that was helpful to me to be able to see that example. And then this next question is actually perfect for the slide that you're on. They're asking if you can grow herbs from seed in a large pot together, or do you need to start them separately and then transplant them into the larger pot together?
If you want to start your herbs from seed, you're going to have to start them in January and start them indoors. Herbs are very slow growers. I know that some people who grow herbs, I don't grow them from seed, but I know another master gardener who started her herbs in January, and they are just now large enough for her to plant outside. So the herbs that you find at a garden store have been started in advance, probably in December, and grown in the greenhouse. So they are much larger, more mature, and easier to plant. But that doesn't mean you can't start them from seed and go from there. You could have a container that you have inside and put the seeds in the container and just keep it watered and in a very warm place and see what happens.
Okay, great, thanks. So this next question is specifically about peppermint. This person has peppermint that's in a large container, about 2 to 3 gallons, and they used to overwinter it in the garage, and then it would easily revive in the spring, but they're finding the past few years that it isn't surviving. They're wondering if they should use a different strain of peppermint or perhaps a larger container. And then they're also having similar problems as rosemary, not lasting through the winter. They're wondering if it's common and if there are things that you would recommend to help with the survivability.
I would first ask if there's any, if they've changed the growing medium at all. If it's in the same pot and they haven't changed the soil, chances are that soil has been giving all of its nutrients to the plant, but has run out. So it might be helpful to take the plant out and start it fresh in a new pot with fresh soil. And that may help. Overwintering rosemary, I have tried it, and I have tried it. I have not succeeded yet. I'm still trying. You have to have a specific temperature, and I think my house is too cool to keep rosemary over the winter. And I do know that some master gardeners have overwintered rosemary, and some of them do it in the garage, but I have a feeling their garage is attached to their house, so it's much warmer in their garage. But again, I'd suggest refreshing the soil.
Gotcha, thank you. The next question is if you could explain some of the signs of watering too much or too little, and then I'll add on for my own benefit if there's a way to tell if you're watering too much or too little.
The best indication of watering too much or too little is your finger. Put it down into the top of the pot. Let's say this is the pot, and you put your finger down maybe 2 inches. And if it's still dry when you get to 2 inches, then you need to water. Again, with the overwatering, sometimes it's the fact that the pot is not being drained properly. So check to make sure you've got drainage within your pot, whether it be pine bark nuggets or shards of pottery, something that will allow the water to drain through the pot and be released. Otherwise, it's going to be in standing water, and that's not good for any plant. Yellowing is an indication that the plant has been has had its roots in too much water. It can droop in some cases, and in some other cases, overnight, it can just be gone. So the best indication is the finger, and put it in and test your soil.
Thank you, that's really helpful. We have a bunch of questions coming up around dealing with various pests. So the first one, this first one is whether they should prune suckers off tomato plants.
I tend to prune them off because I want the stem to be very strong, and I don't want those suckers taking any nutrients away from the plant. So yes, I think it's a good idea to trim those suckers out. And if anybody doesn't know what a sucker is, it's hard to tell here. On a tomato plant where the leaves come out, sometimes there's a small leaf that grows in what I'd call the elbow notch of the main stem and the leaf stem. And that, if you pinch that out, that helps the plant stay strong.
Okay, thank you. And then we have a couple people wondering how you can get rid of stink bugs in the soil, and then also Any tips for protecting your plants from deer?
Ah, two very, two very difficult questions to answer because the deer are browsers. Your garden is their salad bar. I try to put plants that are prickly or fuzzy around the exterior of my garden, my small vegetable garden, because they don't like that texture. There are certain plants that are deer resistant, and on your growing information on your plant um, label, look for deer resistant, and that will help in terms of selecting plants. But deer, they love to browse, and they might eat something that's is deer resistant, but they just had to taste it anyway. So it's very discouraging. And I have also used fishing line about 6 feet high, maybe 5.5 feet high. I put a band of fishing line around my garden, and then I put another band about a foot high so that the deer would touch that as they put their head over to try to eat something, or their leg would touch it, and that would discourage them. But it's very difficult. That and chipmunks. I wish I had the magic answer to getting rid of those problems. As far as the stink bugs, they don't hurt your plants. They're unfortunate because they're all around, and they're usually living in your window casings. If you find that little, what looks like soft shredded wheat in your window casings, that's where the stink bugs are living. We have to have
And
challenges.
yep, exactly. Similarly, someone's wondering if you have tips for starting seeds indoors when you might have pets like cats or other animals that like to get into your plants.
Aha. Yes. One suggestion that I have seen, but I haven't used, there is the plastic trays that plants come in. They're not the solid trays that hold water, but they're the trays that are a grid that hold pots of plants. If you invert those trays over the top of your seeds as you're starting them, it's more difficult for the pet to browse. And it's also a good idea to put them out of the reach of pets if you can. I know I started some tomatoes this year, and I started them in my cellar, and I had them up on a big table, and luckily the cats were not interested, but it's a challenge sometimes. Or you might want to put a plastic laundry basket, invert it over the seedlings, and that might protect them from cats and pets.
Yeah, that's a really good tip. The next question is whether you have any suggestions for planting in clay soil.
Clay soil. It is a challenge, and I do have clay soil. Sometimes amendments will help with the clay soil. Sometimes if you add peat moss or potting mix in with it, sometimes that will lighten the clay. It's a challenge, but I found that also mulching my garden has helped because the mulch, and I use pine bark mulch and pine chips, they tend to break down, and that helps. When you turn that over, it helps kind of lighten up the clay soil.
Okay,
The other
thanks.
thing to do is to get your soil tested. If you're not sure, if your plants are not growing well in your garden soil, have the soil tested, and there's information on how we can test your soil on our website, and you can send us a soil sample or drop one off in Voorheesville, and we will test it and tell you the pH level, which will indicate whether it's good for a lawn or good for a garden, or it's a problem and you need to add something to get the pH either higher or lower.
Okay, great. Yeah, I didn't know that was actually an option.
Yes, it is.
We just have a couple questions and just a couple of minutes left. The next one is wondering how to prune potato plants when you harvest them.
How to prune them when you harvest them. Are you that? I'm not sure I understand the question. I've always, in the few times that I've grown potato, are we potatoes or tomatoes?
It says potato, but maybe it's
All right,
supposed to be
potato with
tomato.
a P. Okay.
Yeah.
The potato plants, you wait until they've fully blossomed and they've fully grown before you can actually pull them out and get your potatoes. The plant goes when when you harvest. You don't save the plant for another round of potatoes. Is that? Yeah, that's.
Okay, that's helpful. And then our last question here is how do you become a master gardener?
Oh, well, first of all, you have to have the desire to be involved in volunteering to help with community gardens or garden education. We have a course that's offered. You have to take the course. It's a 13, 12-week course. It's offered every other year at the Albany County Extension. You can apply to be a master gardener. And once you become a master gardener, you then sign a letter of intent that you're going to spend at least, I think it's 40 hours of volunteer work involved with the gardening, the master gardeners. I joined because I wanted to become more involved with children in gardening, and luckily I've been able to do that. There is information on the website, on the Albany County Cooperative Extension website about how to become a master gardener and how to get an application.
Great. Well, that sounds really interesting and like a really fun process. And speaking of interesting and fun, it's been really great having you on today. I know I learned a lot and hopefully others did as well. So like I mentioned, this whole webinar has been recorded and it will be available online. So thank you to everyone, and especially thank you to Christine for being here today to talk with us. And we hope to hear from you again in the future.
Thank you. Happy gardening.